to our book launch, the webinar for it. This is the second CEO book, and we're really excited to share this with you. This is sort of our first public viewing of it, what we're doing with it. So we're really excited to have everybody here.
There's the cover.
So the book officially, I think you can get it in January, beginning of January. We looked the other day and it looks like you can do the pre-orders definitely, and then it'll ship out, we believe, the beginning of January. So my name is Elissa Milto. I'm Director of Outreach at the CEEO. I'm just going to give a little introduction for myself and then let Merredith talk for a little bit. Before coming to the CEEO, my past life, I was a teacher. My background was special education and English. But I sort of happened into engineering education about 25 years ago, really fell in love with it. And so now I am fortunate enough to be at the CEEO and work with everybody. I do a little bit of research, a lot of outreach, and I work with teachers and students in a variety of different ways. Merredith?
Hello all, I'm Merredith Portsmore. I am the Director of the Center for Engineering Education Outreach and also research faculty here. I do research on all kinds of teaching and learning, online education for teachers, student identity. I have a new project looking at 4-H students, so all kinds of great stuff. And I have a passion for research to practice, so making sure that the work that we do here at the center is translated into things that can actually make a difference for youth in school and out of school, as well as for all the great educators out there doing hands-on engineering with students.
So Merredith and I are just co-authors. We worked with two other people, Chelsea Andrews, who is at the CEEO. She's a research assistant professor. Her background is civil and ocean engineering. And right now she does a lot of research in supporting engineering knowledge and constructing that knowledge for students and teachers. So she spends a lot of time in the classroom. Chris Wright is not at the CEEO. He's at Drexel, but he is a CEEO alum, so we know him pretty well. Right now he's the associate professor for the School of Engineering at Drexel. And he looks a lot at learning and identity development for minoritized youth in an engineering context. So the four of us have been working on this project for about 4 years. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to give you a little bit of background about the CEEO and sort of some of the reasons that we wrote this book, give a brief overview of the book, and then talk a little about the different sections. And at the end, we'll give you some links to get some more information, both some of our free resources and then people we partner with. There is a Q&A. We will keep our eye on it, but most likely we will answer questions as we get to the end. Definitely, please feel free to put some questions there. And as Merredith said, a lot of this is research to practice, and our collaborations and our work with our teachers has really inspired a lot of this.
So, a bit about us. I know some of you know about us, some of you are old friends, hopefully some of you will be new friends. The Center for Engineering Education Outreach is part of Tufts University School of Engineering. For those of you who might be farther afield than New England, right? Tufts is right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And we have a great academic community here at Tufts with folks that we work with in the School of Arts and Sciences, the School of Medicine, even our veterinary campus we've collaborated with over the years. And so we're really fortunate to be here, but our home is here in the School of Engineering. And we are an interdisciplinary center. So the folks at the center, you heard it as you were listening, right, come from all different backgrounds. And we are dedicated to creating the next generation of problem solvers, kindergarten through college. So we go all the way, K to gray, as we like to say, through innovative research-based engineering experiences. And so that we're really excited not only about creating the next workforce in science and engineering, but also about just having youth and young adults know about the practices of engineering and the processes of engineering as they, as that impacts their everyday lives as citizens, as voters, as everything in between. We would love, the next a future president of the U.S. to be have that experience in thinking with engineering as a tool. We really, really feel passionate here. You'll see it in the book and you'll see it in any work you come across from the center, is that today's youth are amazing. They're amazing. Kids can think, invent, discover, change the world. So we think about youth as budding engineers, right? And all of you who have interacted with 4-year-olds building blocks or making forts out of sticks and pillows know this. But it's a really important thing to keep in mind when we're doing work inside or outside the classroom, because we know that if there's an issue, if kids aren't excited, if they aren't engaged, if they aren't learning, then it's up to us to create a new environment, to figure out what's going on, because they have all those resources and capabilities, and we need to figure out how to tap into them, how to design learning experiences and environments that get them, because we know that if we handed them a bunch of materials, they would do amazingly creative things with it. And so the things that need to happen in the world are up to the grown-ups to do good. And there's also amazing grown-ups, teachers that are doing good in the world, whether they're doing it in formal classrooms or informal classrooms. We think of teachers as dynamic professionals who are really in interaction with students' ideas, an incredibly important part of the learning process. A lot of times we talk about engineering and hands-on learning, we say, oh, the materials they got to make. But we know that the teachers are so important. We often say teachers are to learning as doctors are to medicine, right? There's all the raw materials there, but you need an experienced educator to help students reflect, to guide them, to manage their learning, their knowledge, their affect, all those things. So we take this asset-based approach to thinking about how do we create exciting things for both those amazing youth and those amazing educators. And we've been doing it for a long time. The CEEO was founded in 1996. So we've had many projects. And we like to think about doing this work in all kinds of places. You find those like-minded folks who are excited about creating experience for youth all over the world. We're almost on every continent. And you can see all the places we've been highlighted in yellow, right? It's almost like, wait, where? So yeah, Antarctica is still a challenge, but we still have ideas there. We are really excited to learn with and collaborate with folks everywhere and really see how different spaces and cultures and practices all can center youth and how we're supporting them in lots of different ways. One thing that's important to have kind of in the back of your mind as you think about this is we take a really broad definition of engineering. Oftentimes engineering gets carved into this really small definition that only uses math and science. And while math and science are amazing tools for doing engineering, we talk about engineering as applying understandings of the world, which includes math and science, but also much, much more about humans, about psychology, about ethics, in the pursuit of solutions to problem. And it's that pursuit, right? That idea that there are problems in the world that we are going to find solutions for. And that's really exciting because that's new information. That's a new experience. It's different than we're going to try and pour knowledge into the heads of kids. We're going to help them to pursue solutions to problems. And I think in today's world, with all the challenges we face, that's really, really an exciting way to think about empowering our youth. And if we want those youth, right, those 8-year-olds, those 5-year-olds, those 15-year-olds that are sitting in our spaces today to be the next generation of innovators, we need to give them practice innovating. Sometimes it feels like we need to really prepare them before we let them touch the materials or engage with problem solving. But that decreases the likelihood that they are going to go on and think, oh, I'm a problem solver. So you'll see throughout the book and throughout all of our work, right, giving students that opportunity to be hands-on, to wrestle with tough questions, to try crazy materials, and to really dig into that work in all kinds of ways. And so the motivation for this book came out of the fact that with doing this work in kindergarten, in middle schools in Brazil, in Denmark, in all kinds of classrooms in Massachusetts, we really have learned with educators and through all kinds of different work, a lot of different ways to think about this. And so we're really excited to kind of to bring that all together in one place. And you'll see that the acknowledgments in the book is a huge section as we acknowledge that this actually comes from so many people. While authors, may think of, particular authors like Rick Riordan wrote all of Percy Jackson, it was all in his head. This really represents collective work. We have been working with amazing educators, administrators, and students for over 2 decades. And what we really wanted to do here is bring that all together and share it with even more folks. So what you'll see as Elissa takes you through the next section is the goals that we worked on. So to share ways to introduce engineering, we were really thinking about, right? This is a new thing often that youth are doing, that students are doing. How can we, what's the on-ramp there? To share activities, right? We want to talk about the practical, right? It's great to talk about the theoretical and the next generation of problem solvers, but on Wednesday at 1 o'clock, when you go in with a new group of students to do engineering, what does that look like? What can you do? Throughout our work, right, you'll see, creating the next generation of innovators means giving all students that experience, regardless of where they're in school, what their background is. So you'll see throughout the book a focus on equity and broadening who participates in engineering, which often means pushing on the walls of what we call engineering. So maybe it doesn't look like the same thing that they do at NASA. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it's, bringing in those practices of engineering to operate on a storybook or a problem that a injured dachshund from the vet school has. And really help teachers anticipate what students do, right? Again, if we think about that analogy that teachers are to learning as doctors are to medicine, it would be nice to be able to think about what might students do so I can plan what I'm going to do with them. And so there are resources in the book, there are snippets from classroom, there are all kinds of great things to do that. And so Elissa will give you a little tour of the book, and then we'll dive deeper to show you what's in there. So that you can see how this could be useful for you.
All right. So as Meredith said, we've really collaborated. We both said collaborated with teachers. So the book has a lot of case studies and short vignettes about what this actually looks like in the classroom, giving you an idea of sort of teachers' thought process behind everything. So that really just is throughout the book. And then it obviously follows our CEO principles. So it's not a prescribed curriculum where we say do this and then this is the next thing you do. It really just, takes teachers as those people who know about their classroom more the most, and it really just offers a lot of choice. So we're just trying to help share what we know and we've seen work well and what teachers have told us works well, and try to put it in one place. So the first section of the book is just an introduction to engineering education and engineering as well. So this really gives you a lot of background knowledge. It talks a lot about how to help students, how to facilitate so that their knowledge is at the forefront. It's not always about trying to give them the information. It's often trying to get the information out of them, trying to figure out, what is interesting to them. If there are a couple problems, have them pick one so that you can really build on their knowledge, skills, and engagement. It's really important to us that students, they're seen as possessing a lot of assets. And throughout the books, that's how we really present the students as well. And that is a great starting place. So that is the first section. And then we end on that section. Oh, go back for 1 second.
Sorry.
On talking about chapter 5 is talking about what counts as engineering. As Meredith said, we do it, you have a very broad definition of it and what it can look like in the classroom. So we really want to talk about that. And there's a little piece we'll talk about a little bit more in the webinar. Now go ahead.
Next slide.
So this is the shortest section, and this is really a lot of case studies showing what it can look like when you start doing this in your classroom. And so there's like a longer case study that really helps you see a couple teachers and what their thought process was and how they made decisions both in planning and in the moment when they were in the classroom working with students when something was going as they thought or perhaps not as they thought it was going to go. And then we give several activities to get you started. These are just launching off points, and they all have a different sort of a different flavor and goal. And then the third part is really those practical aspects. So we've given you all this information. We think it's really important, but that doesn't necessarily provide that next step to actually start doing it yourself. So we really focused on section 3 and giving you a lot of information. Some of it's planning sheets, some of it's just so conversations about, if you're choosing materials, which one might be good for your classroom, how to give students um, a lot of experience building. And so we really built those in, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those later on. All right, so also in the last, we have a very large appendix of lots of classroom resources. So these are the different kinds of classroom resources we have. I'm not going to read them all, but a lot of these are also available for free on our website. These were all things that we've developed with teachers that teachers say are really important. And whenever we do professional development, these are the types of things we find teachers asking for. So if you go to the next one, Meredith, I'm just going to look at the one of these in a little bit greater detail. So for example, we have some introductory lesson plans, and I've just picked pictures. We picked pictures from 4 of them. The first one is building a house. A real goal of that one is exploration of materials. Not all students have the same experience building, and they don't really understand the materials of properties maybe in the same way. So by giving them that experience before you jump into these huge engineering projects, it really helps level that playing field. The second one is something we call the wind tube, where it's just this plastic tube with a fan underneath, and students build things to try and stay afloat in that tube for like 3 to 5 seconds. And that's really about iteration. So each of these is focusing on 1 or 2 different things. The next one is a pencil holder. I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail in a minute. And then the 4th one is a backpack. So giving each group of students a different stuffed animal, and they have to build a bag for it. So the bags are going to look different based on the needs of their particular stuffed animal. In this case, the lobster one, it's on their back. They have to be able to, don't know exactly what they have in there, but it really starts to help students think about different clients and how you say a backpack, but that doesn't mean it's going to look the same for everybody. And that's very fun too, the students like that. All right, so today, the next thing we're going to do is talk a little bit more about engineering education in K-8, and then give you, talk about an activity, sort of an introductory activity to get you started, the pencil holder, and then jump into some logistics that are really important as you do this in the classroom.
Yeah, so thinking about that first section, we'll just share some highlights here that are interesting and can be powerful. Just giving you some taste of what's in there so you can see if this is a resource that makes sense for you. Yeah, the first sections also give some of the evidence and claims for why we do engineering in school. So it can also be a resource if you're writing a grant or looking for resources to support your work. I know it's not the best setup that we have, at least in the US, for that teachers are looking for resources, but that is the reality that we live in. So, right, we know that K provides these opportunities, and why do we think it's so important, right? A lot of times when we talk about pre-college engineering, folks are like, it's so they become engineers, but it's also so that they are doing, right, we're offering alternate pedagogies, alternate ways of doing school, right? So we're doing that hands-on piece in ways that's really powerful. We're letting students have agency and choice in what happens in school, which often changes how kids approach school in general. We're offering chances for safe iteration and failure. We're going to try something, we're going to see if it works, right? Things we want them to do in other spaces, but may make the most sense here. Group work. I bet we can make this whole webinar and everyone on it have an amazing discussion about how children are working in groups today and what that looks like. And engineering is definitely a really unique context for that. Elissa alluded to the empathy and perspective taking, right? So other things that we care about are really deeply connected to engineering, and that we're working to serve all students, right? So throughout the chapters, what we're doing is saying, well, have you thought about how this might work with different kids with different backgrounds, different experiences? What are their interests? How can you connect to their lived experiences? While race cars, rockets, and things that go to Mars are cool, right? There's also things within students' communities and their own experiences that are really powerful contexts for engineering. So engineering doesn't have to be this thing that happens in giant corporations and huge space agencies, right? It can be something that happens in their community and their classrooms. We talk about that in that section. This is an example from one of our local classrooms. They were 5th graders, and after doing some different hands-on projects, they found problems in their school. And so we have a case study in these early chapters of what they tagged as the Guminator. And people will be like, have you seen the Guminator? It's just a great name. And we can argue about why they found this problem in their school where there was gum on the bottom of all these desks. Whether gum is a great idea for school or not. But anyway, one group, I'll say a little bit more here about, right, decided, to tackle this problem. And it's a real problem. And it's real in terms of the fact that they were able to identify, what was the problem? What were the important things to solve it? And so they started off with the picture on the far left of, 2 forks and a plastic bag. And then they tried to get some gum off the desk and they had an experience like, ooh, that didn't work well. And then they had time to iterate and come back. And it eventually evolved to the solution on the right where there was a spray bottle to help loosen the gum. There was a way to capture it. There were removable bags, so nobody ever had to touch it. They really, really had this experience of thinking through an engineering problem in a really careful way. I'm sure you all have used some technology in your world where you're like, did people really think through how to use this? And that's right, that's the evolution of their design, but there's so much more that happened in this project in terms of the time that the educator planned for it, the conversations that they facilitated to enable the feedback and iteration, and this opportunity that they had to revisit and test and talk to each other. In this classroom, students did different problems. Some did flushing toilets, some did, the trash, folks missing the trash can. So we had this really great community, and we see all the opportunities this provided for learning and discussion and communication. And so the building, the making, the engineering was one part of it, but we see all this other constellation of things that go with it, which is really powerful. So we have that in mind, and I'm sure if you've come here today, you've probably already done some amazing work with your classroom. So the other thing we try and do in the early chapters, just give a framework, like what is an engineering activity? What does it look like? What do we want to see happening? And we have this definition of engineering. We know that it's pursuit of problems, and we have this collection of practices, right? You'll often see it called the engineering design process, things we want students to do. And what we found is it is useful to have some kind of guardrails when we say, is it engineering? Because, right, if we want students to be doing research, brainstorming, iterating, all of those pieces, it's helpful if the problems that we give them have multiple possible solutions, right? If I, only give you 3 toothpicks and a gumdrop, right, maybe there's only one way that will stand up on your desk. And that's an interesting thing to do with children, but it's not necessarily engineering. We want them to have that experience that there's more than one way to do it. There's different ways to think about it. They can bring different resources to it, so that they will actually be doing these practices and that the solutions are testable in some way, right? There are wonderful, wonderful things that happen in school with children doing art and dioramas and all kinds of things. But if we want, again, right, if we want that making, that testing, that creating, we want them to actually be able to try these things out. Right, that's a really interesting thing I think about engineering as a discipline is even professional engineers, right, try things and they fail, right? They go through months and months of testing before they release a new smartphone. The professionals at NASA go through months and months of testing and have all kinds of failures. And I think that's a really important message that we have for children is that's a good process, right? So often we reward getting something right on the first time or having the worksheet or writing perfect the first time, but that iteration is a really powerful way of thinking. So if we have that, we've worked it in, and you'll see this throughout the book, and also I'll come back to it, is that we wrote it into what we call the engineering design task framework, which just helps us kind of keep track of what different activities are doing. And we use this, we've used it in our courses with educators. I bet some people on this call recognize it. It's just prettier now. As a way of kind of keeping track of what they're doing. So those are all those same practices we just saw, but we do it in this format so we can say, how are we doing different aspects of it? So if we take the Guminator, for example, this project that was a really great opportunity for problem scoping, right? The students found the problem. They had to figure out what would make me successful. They might have done some research, but that might not have been their heaviest part because it was a really great problem for building and testing, right? They could do it, they could try it, they could redesign it. So it was a really powerful opportunity for students to say, hey, wow, it's great to just try an idea and test it. The materials are low cost. There's plenty of gum on desks in this particular elementary school. So that iterating part was really powerful. And then he did a little bit of sharing solutions. And we say this, and we have this representation to say that not every project has to do every aspect of engineering. And that's a really important thing that we talk about with teachers and that we've done in our work over the years, that, some projects really help us, right? Because these are learners, they aren't professional engineers. So sometimes they need an opportunity to kind of isolate and work on particular skills, whether that's problem scoping and building or talking to other humans their same age. So this is a tool that you'll see throughout the book and that we have blank copies of if you want to use on your own thing, just as a way to kind of frame things. So you can imagine that if you had a few activities, if you have students for multiple weeks or multiple sessions, you could say, okay, yeah, by the time we get done with having them, they've done all these kinds of things. And they can build to a really cohesive final project if you are able to do that in your space, or they've at least gotten exposure to all of it. So that first section is hopefully giving, for those of you who've been doing engineering for a long time, it's hopefully giving support for ideas and things you're already doing, and maybe some there. And for those of you who might be newer on this journey, kind of walking you through like, okay, what is this engineering thing I'm doing? I know it looks like science, it looks like art, but it's really its own thing. So I hand it back to Elissa for getting folks beyond that.
Excellent, thanks. So the second section is how do you do this? These are great. I know just looking at names that a lot of the people in this webinar are already doing this, but this is really thinking about that, you have this information. I think I said this before. So you have this information. Now what? Do you want to do something really short just to introduce this to students? Maybe they haven't done it before, or do you want to do something a little more complex? So if you can go to the next slide, Meredith. So there are a couple different ways. Even if you've been doing engineering, perhaps you have a group of students that haven't. So doing a few short introductory activities, they may be 15 minutes each, they may be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but really trying to build that knowledge and experience with students since they're all coming from different places. And this is, if you haven't done it before, sharing your expectations very explicitly about engineering time. If this may look different than it looks other times in the day. Meredith was talking about often we really reward that first time being done, or the answer. That is not going to be engineering time. So really, you talk to your students about, some of you might get frustrated. I'm also expecting that you might, you're going to collaborate with each other. But just having that out there so you can have conversations. And this is going to lead to those classroom norms that also might be a little bit different at different times in the day. And it's really nice to have students participate in coming up with those norms as well, just so they feel really invested in this time. I'm going to talk next. Oops, sorry. So there's so many things to do. You're going to do any kind of activity, but especially a hands-on one. It was really hard for us to just choose a couple things in these bullet points, because we could just go on listing all these little things. But these are some of the things that are especially important. Obviously, the goals that you have, do they align with the standards? It's something some people are really worried about, and schools are. But then how are they reaching the academic goals for this classroom? And then students might have individual goals that you can really use this for as well. Partnering and group pairing, that's important because different people come in with different collaboration abilities. So how can you also make sure that you're pairing people so that they're really getting the most out of the time? And then doing some work trying to figure out the students' interest. Maybe you're starting at the beginning of the year and you don't really know your students very well, just to make sure that this is something, so it's not the rockets and race cars as Meredith was talking about, but there's something that everybody can find that they connect with. All right, so Meredith was talking about what makes an engineering activity. We talk about this in the book, and this was a long conversation just to get to do this slide, the information on this slide. Lots of conversations with more people than just the 4 co-authors. But so we really thought about an engineering problem. There has to be a problem or a goal that you're working towards. It's not just fidgeting or tinkering, which has its own value. That's really great. But for an engineering problem to be an engineering activity, you really have to have that goal. There needs to be something specific that it needs to do, and that may differ if students in the classroom are solving different problems. The criteria might be different for each activity or for each thing that they're building. And there are lots of constraints. Probably time and materials is the same for everybody. You can throw money in there with materials as well, but then there might be constraints based on individual things that students are building that do differ from time to time. So coming up with some of these things, including the testing processes, we are thinking about as problem scoping, that we really want to have students do that and think about the problem and all the information that they need to solve the problem. But sometimes that is provided by the teacher, whereas sometimes the students are doing it, it's given to them. We go a lot more into detail in the book. And then finally, the testing process, there has to be a way that if you're actually meeting that criteria to prove that it works, and it's not just saying, yes, this is what's going to happen, which adults and kids sometimes get by with, but make sure they test it, and that also might differ by what they're building. All right, so what makes something an engineering activity is also some authentic engineering questions. So there's more than one possible solution. So if students are given the same 3 materials and they sort of know what they're building, everybody's going to build this thing. That's not really an engineering activity. That might be a great way to explore materials or do another piece, collaboration. There are lots of things, but that wouldn't necessarily be an engineering activity. I touched on it being testable and having a clear goal. So we go into this in more detail in the book and really apply it to different situations. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about an introductory activity that's just making a pencil holder. It's really simple. One of the reasons I really like this is because it levels the playing field so students can get experience working with materials, and it's really quick. So this is a great way as a teacher. You can also sort of assess and see where your kids are and what their experience level is with materials, with engineering, but also working with each other. And this activity has multiple goals. So if you'll go to the next one. So there's that trajectory we worked on. So in this one, maybe you're not doing the problem scoping, you've given them the problem. You are going to build a pencil holder and it needs to hold, 10 pencils or pens. So the teacher's doing that problem scoping. Maybe you ask them to just look around on the internet for a few minutes or to talk to friends about different pencil holders that they have used or they have seen. So that's just a small piece. They need to plan what they're going to build and then build it. And then the evaluation for this in testing is putting your pen or pencils in it and does it hold it? There are different ways that you can do that. And then you can share solutions. So this is really nice because they're working on collaboration skills, but it's also a great foundational activity because you can refer back to it later. So maybe they don't spend a lot of time researching, but you can say when they're working on something that's more complex and open-ended, hey, remember when we did the pencil holder and you just went online for a few minutes to see what was out there already so that you weren't recreating something and you were figuring out what elements you liked. So each of those just touches on what they're doing, but that you can use that much later in conversations that you're having with them. And here are some student examples of pencil holders. And students get really excited about this. Pretty much all students have some experience with a pencil holder, either on their desk or something mobile. There's the bird one that you've seen. There's one with a handle next, the one just with cardboard in the middle, which was super easy. And they used a glue gun, but it did meet all the criteria. The one on the bottom right, the students did it that way because they wanted to be able to have it on the desk. They have that little one that is vertical so that they don't fall out if it falls off the desk. Apparently there was a lot of problem with things falling, getting bumped off the desk, so that was important. And then the one at the top, it was very important to them that it looked good.
And this is so powerful, right? The idea that, there was a problem in class and that there are 5, 10, 15, 20 different solutions, right? It really, as Elissa talks about in those chapters, sets the norm that this is a different kind of space where, right, there may be challenges in school where there's only one right answer. There's a lot of different answers here, and a lot of different space for creativity, for students to engage with different parts of the process in different ways. And, that's a lot of what we care about in the equity space, right? Is saying your ideas are important, right? It's not just about like, do you have the qualities to be an engineer? Right? In today's day and age, it's the other way around. Like, you have a lot of great qualities, and engineering would benefit from your ideas and your experiences. So I love activities like this and the other one that Elissa talks about in these chapters that give kids that message. So on to section 3. We are acknowledging it is hard work to be an engineering teacher. There are a lot of things to think about. And you certainly don't need to think about all of them at once. But what we found over the years is as folks do this work, right, as you get your activities going with students, you start to have more and more questions and, refine different parts of the process. And so if you think about these chapters, some of them address that, and some of them dig into, okay, I'm going to be a teacher of engineering. I'm ready for this. How do I plan for it? How do I assess it? How do I fit it into that structure we know as school? One of the pieces that's near and dear to my heart is drawing. And so in our drawing and writing chapter, we talk about what is the purpose of drawing. Sometimes, right, we're not quite sure, right? Like, drawing has one purpose in art. It might have one purpose when students are planning. And so we talk a lot about how drawing can be used as a tool in the classroom and what to expect from it, right? Can I use it as formative assessment to understand where students are, what they're thinking of? Can I use it, in this case, as a communication tool, right? Sometimes 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds don't have the words to say, I want to build this, and I want to build this, and how do we work together? So we talk about how drawing can be a really powerful, a different way for them to represent and share knowledge. And that's really exciting, right? Because we're giving kids more tools for their overall toolbox, as well as thinking like within the professional discipline of engineering, drawing and representation is a crucial tool. And not to be left out is writing. Which is something we do a lot in school. And sometimes I've had teachers say, kids write all day. I don't want them, writing in my engineering class. And I'm like, I totally respect, right, giving kids more hands-on opportunity, but we want to use writing for where it supports kids doing engineering in powerful ways. So does it help them reflect on the process, to help them do that synthesis piece, right? Sometimes a popular one we've done in many classrooms is having kids build their own stomp rockets, right? Where you step on an airbag, right? And it pushes air out and launches something into the air. They're a commercial toy, but you can certainly make your own. And so we could do that for a while. And if we didn't take the time, right, to slow down and say, okay, well, what kind of materials were great for making stomp rockets? What were the way we assembled them that made it? And so we talk about how, some small prompts in writing, again, can help with those learning processes. So engineering is certainly not different in that respect, that we want that time for synthesis and reflection. And there's lots of easy ways we can do it that are ways that help us as educators just know how to serve our students better. We are also super excited about this chapter that comes from Chelsea Andrews and her team. They've been doing a ton of work in classrooms looking at what our most amazing superheroes, otherwise known as teachers, do, which is facilitate classroom conversations about engineering. So you have 20, 25, 30 kids in your classroom. How are you helping do some of that synthesis and reflection as a whole class, or planning? And so she talks about what different kinds of talk, where you might plan to have conversations in your classroom. It might not be after every part of the design process, but maybe to level the playing field, you need a classroom brainstorm, because you have students who maybe haven't had a lot of experience with these ideas. And so can you use that space to say, hey, what are different ways we could, attach these pieces together? Can everybody think of some ideas? And so they share in this chapter lots of different tools for doing that, around problem scoping talks. How do we find one? How do we reflect on what happened. They also dig into an incredibly important issue of impact talks, like who is helped and who is harmed by different engineering designs, both, you know, in the world and ones that we might make, because we want that next generation of problem solvers to be thoughtful about who is served by engineering. So the chapter does a really nice job of sharing all that, but even better is they have their own website where you can sign up and watch videos of teachers doing this in action. So this is part of a ongoing research project they have, and they have lots of great resources that you can use for your own advancement, or if you facilitate PD or a community of practice with folks, there's lots of great examples of teachers leading conversations about stomp rockets or about, you know, should we build the telescope in this particular location? Who would be helped? Who would be harmed? So lots and lots of good stuff there. The next one is you, Elissa, talking about your chapter on inclusive and connected classrooms.
So definitely chapter 3 or section 3 of the book. Meredith and I had a hard time picking which things we should talk about today. This isn't everything, but this was something we knew we had to include. Everybody is coming with a different experience, different needs when they and any activity they do for the classroom. And you know, we all know that engineering is not the most diverse field. So we think a lot about how do we make sure that there's a way to know that for students to know their experience is valued and valuable, and that they are able to participate in this. And, you know, it could be that there's students who get special education services, perhaps there's students who English is not their first language. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can include those students as well. One of the things we really look at is the Universal Design for Learning Principles, and our friends over at CAST, which is actually located near us in this region of the country. And so we are always looking at that and sort of aligning that, or trying to do what we're doing aligned to what their principles are. See if you can jump to the next one, Meredith. So here are just a couple different ways that we can do that. One, when you're coming up with the activities and the way you frame them for students, is it interesting to them? Are they able to build on their own assets? And do they understand the context? Like if you're presenting an activity and they don't really understand what it's about, they might not be able to engage. They probably won't be able to brainstorm if they don't have that experience and understanding in the first place. And these are just portions of this chapter. The other thing is like the context. Do they have the knowledge for the engineering specific, the disciplinary knowledge to do this, to do the task? So that might be something you need to talk about with them, or maybe figure out a way that people can use different kinds of knowledge to do the activity. And then just, do they know how to use the materials? Have they had experience using the materials? Perhaps this isn't such a big deal if you're building a cardboard house, but if you're doing a robotics activity and some kids are in first Lego League and other kids have never touched it before, that is a great time to make sure that everybody has some experience and can go into it feeling that they are capable. Another thing that's super important is social emotional learning. This isn't just about the academics and the discipline. How do we make sure that students are working with each other well, that they're being kind to each other, and if they seem frustrated or they're not really sure what to do, that we can help them with that? And how can we set up activities beforehand and then in the moment to make sure that we're supporting students in this way? And the fourth one we just started talking about today is the executive functioning. Maybe some students have trouble with processing language, or they need multiple modes of expression, but these are all different types of things. And we lay it out a little more succinctly in the chapter and give some suggestions for these things. Moving on.
Yeah, I will say this is a great section that really Elissa's done a ton of work in with her background in special ed and all experience in the classroom. That's really I think unique in this space because, you know, folks have thought about how to address some of these things generally, but right, engineering brings up some really unique opportunities where we have to think about addressing these needs in really particular ways because we want everyone to be included.
Actually go back, because as long as you're, I also want to say that Chris and I wrote this together, so it wasn't just me on that chapter. But just some of the research that we're doing even at the center is looking at how can students with autism do robotics. So those are different, you know, just taking what is we already know and what's happening, and then trying to figure out how can we have students enter, you meet them where they are and enter into a way that makes sense for them and not necessarily just for the teacher. All right, materials. So we've touched on this, that, you know, all students should have experience with the materials. What we really get into in one chapter of the book, the different materials and what you might get. What are the affordances and constraints of using different types of materials? So perhaps you're using craft materials versus a robotics kit. The craft materials are great because students can quite easily and quickly learn how to use them, but they don't really have the capabilities. Most likely, don't have sensors and actuators and things like that. Whereas a robotics kit has that, but it might take a lot of ramp up, and it might take you several weeks into a quarter or semester before students are actually able to incorporate those into engineering activities and designs in a really substantive way. And then, you're always thinking about the cost of things and functionality. So not only is it about picking those materials, but it's also about trying to figure out how to help students incorporate those into designs and how that works with your classroom management structure. So thinking about if you present students the materials before they still start planning, what does that do? If you do it midway, they've done a plan, then they're pick the materials and see what matches what they have in the classroom. What does that do for you? What are the benefits and the opposite of benefits? I can't think of that right now, what that is. We sort of think that having students have that experience beforehand actually helps them with their planning because they know what to draw on, and they have an idea of how things fit together. But then we also talk about how can you help students gather materials so it's not a free-for-all where some students don't plan and they just go in and sort of hoard things and gather them versus the students who really plan for a long time and then go to the table. Maybe you have some materials and there's nothing left that they really need because they've spent so much time having conversations and really thinking about how it's going to work before they go get those. So we really try in all aspects at Merredith, talked about some of these parts of the books as well, really try to think about the practical logistics of this in a classroom.
Yeah, I can't tell you, that comes from so many professional developments and courses that all of the authors and other folks were involved in, where that material piece can be overwhelming, right? Where do you keep them? What do you do with them? How do you keep all the popsicle sticks from becoming weapons, and all the things that happen when kids get the access to this. And so this another has a lot of great tips and resources.
And actually, sorry, before you jump in, I don't think we said this at the beginning. We've worked with teachers in all sorts of settings that have really gone into this book. So formal classrooms, informal settings, elementary, up to 8th grade, obviously, in rural settings, urban settings. So we really were trying to synthesize what people in different settings are saying as well.
Yeah, and a variety of budgets too, right? Like, right, not every school has a budget for a robotics material, and still there's many amazing things that you can do with recycled materials, and the materials hopefully you have access to of tape and other things. So, and we know that assessment is also a reality of what happens, and we try and think of that in really helpful ways in this chapter, in terms of, like, one thing, assessment is just helping me teach the youth that are in front of me in a way. So we talk about formative assessment. We have vignettes in there that are saying, like, what does this look like? When I go to a first grade classroom, these are drawings of kids had before they made a chair for a stuffed animal, often called Chair for Mr. Bear, from a very old time. And right, like, okay, I walk over to this group, and what does this drawing tell me? Like, what am I seeing there? I can use it as a way to start a conversation between the two students. Okay, well, Elissa, you drew this, and Merredith, you drew this. Do you guys agree on what's happening here? I can use it to help guide them. Well, how's that back part going to get attached here? So just thinking about the ways in which we can put things in place that just help us to guide our students through the process in a way that still honors their ideas and agency, but also lets us, again, right, we care about the chaos, right? So right, it's helpful. Drawing is this really safe space for doing these. And in the formative section, we also talk about conversations we might have with students, ways in which we might do observations and notice things that are happening, ways that might be, right, things that we want to intervene with just an individual group, like, hey, or right, like, wow, I'm noticing this happening across the whole class. Maybe there's a teachable moment here for here next time. And then, of course, the almighty summative assessment. And folks use this in varied ways. Some folks have the luxury of not having to do assessments, but there's many spaces we have. This has a lot of great teacher-derived materials where they're saying, okay, this is what I want. And sometimes, and we have different kinds of assessment examples in there from different places. Some of them are more reflective, right? Like I want students, what I'm grading you on is, can you talk about your project, right? Not so much the physical project, but also what can you tell me about your project? How can you explain your process? As well as there's rubrics in there about like, okay, it is about the functionality of your project. Did it work? Did it, was it able to accomplish, the goals that we set out for it? And so thinking about how that plays into grading and also feedback to the student, right? We really focused on summative assessments that can give students feedback to say, hey, I really, loved how you did the planning, and I loved how you, spec'd out your design. I think, you had a hard time making it work. So, what would you do differently next time? Right? Because I'm sure we can all tell stories about the group that did so much planning that they never got to making. And they were not receptive to prompts to kind of be like, you need to be done planning and you need to just try things out. And vice versa, right? The group that didn't do that. So helping students learn to do that and having assessment not only support the fact that we need to offer a grade for the course, but we also need to give, help kids think about their practices. We go on to activity sequences, right? We've been talking very much about one-off experiences, but you likely have kiddos for multiple sessions. We've worked with teachers who, do engineering in 6-week rotations for 3 or 4 different groups of elementary and middle schooler. We've worked with teachers who, are classroom teachers who are doing this at different points throughout the year and kind of everything in between. STEM specialists, high school engineering teachers, all the way. So we start to think about what those kinds of, what that sequence might look like that we've seen be really successful, both from our own research or from things teachers have shared with us. And so in there you see that you'll see a sequence for robotics, a sequence for found materials, and different ways that you might structure a bigger final project. And I will fully acknowledge that not everybody can do big final projects. We've worked with lots of teachers, and sometimes, right, you don't have kids long enough to be able to think like, oh, this is culminating to something, and you're just doing a collection of projects. So we certainly acknowledge and understand that there's engineering is being implemented in schools in wildly different ways. But this section gives you some idea of like, what does that look like? What's, we're going to revisit ideas. We're going to introduce students to both materials and practices, and how do we kind of make that all fit together? So there's topics in there about activity introduction, how we do that, cross-curricular connections, where can we take advantage of things students are doing in other contexts and or support it. The all fun classroom management, right? This is it's really an exciting setting for kids. And so sometimes there's things to manage there as well. As well as a timeline and how we move from structured to more open-ended activities. And you will do what you can do in your setting. I think sometimes when we work with teachers, they're like, but in my setting, I can't do that. I'm not allowed. I don't have them for enough time. And what we really hope is that you see the tools here is, use what you can, right? Use what you can. It's certainly not saying that if you aren't doing all of these things, you're not doing an amazing job. If you're doing engineering in school, you're doing an amazing job, and hopefully there's some resources and ways of thinking here that can help you.
We've sort of had the activities as a buffet in a way, that we have them in some sequences just so you could see the flow, but then we have them as standalone as well with some of the target skills we hope that students are working on.
Yeah. And I think, and another thing, right, we know that we don't, this isn't a curriculum, right? It's a book. You probably have your own ideas, your activities, and if you're working towards something, we want to give you scaffolds as educators to do that. So the final project scaffold that's in there is really about, how can I think through this? So it's synthesizing some of these pieces into like, okay, my kids have done small activities with materials. They've had opportunities to explore engineering practices like iteration and planning. I want them to do something a little bit bigger. What does that look like? Because you're still scaffolding it. You're still an incredibly powerful force in getting students to that next step. And so we have in there a tool, if you're planning one, that you might think about, like, what do my days look like? So just something to help take the load off of you and saying, like, here's a structure that's been successful in terms of, okay, you're going to build, and then you'll see here on day 4, this is one that took us a few years to nail and get to loom, but we use it in a lot of projects, is the mid-design share out, right? Oftentimes we build up to these final share outs, and kids are exhausted and they've dumped everything they have into their final project, and they don't want to hear anything about, right, what they could have done, should have done, would have done. And so we structured many of our projects to really focus on that mid-design, where they still have time to iterate and redesign. And you'll see we talk about, just right, the conversations we have there are where you see that engineering, where they're willing to listen to each other, where they're willing to think about, and reflect and kind of refine their own ideas and thinking, because there's still time to do something. And it really just kind of shifts, the way it works, and the way, and is a powerful experience for them. And so that's another tool and resource for folks. So that was the tour of the book. Thanks for sticking with us. You guys are dedicated. There is the book website. Do you want to say more about that, Elissa?
Sure. And before that, the Design Talks website that Meredith was talking about, that is also in the chat. So our book website, you can go, and a lot of the resources that we talked about are there for free. So you can check those out and print those. And then also the CEEO website, we can put in there. I assume most of you had it because you're here, but just in case, we can add that. You can go to, you can use the link, or you can scan with the QR code. I think we have a couple more things, and we will let you, we are aware. Thank you for being here. And the first time as we said, we talked about this, so we're getting our timing down, but we will get you out in 1 minute. So we have, I think, 2 more slides to share. One is I am teaching an integrated engineering and literacy graduate course, which also is our novel engineering project. And most of the time, this is people who are in practice, and that is 3 graduate credits. So you can go there. The link just went in the chat. And the other class that we are debuting this year for practitioners is using artificial intelligence. So that's pretty good. Ethan Danahy, who's one of the people at the CEEO, has been doing a lot of work in that field with high school students and with college students. So if you can go to the next slide, I think they're just, there we go, some links. Thank you so much for being here and listening to us for the last hour.
Yeah, we're excited. We'll do a drawing for the book once it's fully published from the folks who attended today. So stay tuned in your email for that, and we'll get that out to folks. We will stick around if you have any questions, but we know you all are busy folks. But if you want to use the Q&A piece, please type in questions and we'll answer them. Definitely follow us on all of the social media and our email list. That's where we release all our free tools, our opportunities for things that are coming up. And if you do end up using the book in any way, shape, or form, please let us know. I always tell my teachers, it's like baby and puppy pictures. I love nothing better than getting email with, like, here, my class did bear chairs, or my class did this, or, I added this drawing piece to my thing. We love hearing from you, right? We're a small organization and we love talking to teachers. So definitely share anything you've been working on.
Definitely like grandparents in that aspect. And if you have questions,
that's what we are.
If you read something and you need some more clarification, or you just want to, have a question, please feel reach out to us. Thank you. Everyone have a good holiday season, and enjoy the next couple weeks.